This is Sarah Milligan with the Oklahoma State University Library with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. I'm interviewing Callie Connolly. We're in Muskogee. We're in the building for the Northeastern State University campus in Muskogee. And today's date is June 26, 2015. This is an interview for the Cowboy in Every County project, and we are going to be talking with Callie a little bit today just about her time at OSU, her life since, and all the adventures she's gotten into before, during, and after her time there. All right, so let's just start. Just tell me a little bit about yourself. Just start wherever you want. Tell me about you and your family and whatever you feel comfortable.
Well, I am one of 3 kids. I'm the youngest. I was the belated baby when my mother thought she couldn't have any children anymore, and then all of a sudden in her 40s here I came. I'm 16 years apart from my nearest sibling, so that's been interesting. I tell everybody I'm the oldest, youngest, and middle child, and they all look at me like I'm crazy, and I say, well, I'm the oldest out of all of my siblings' children, the youngest out of my actual siblings, and in between the 2.
I think there's probably a lot of truth to that. I'm not sure where you fall on like the child graph though, you know?
Yeah, it's
personality.
I don't know. I'm somewhere.
So where did you grow up and where's your family from?
I went to elementary school in Webbers Falls, Oklahoma, and then my grandma's health started deteriorating a little bit, and my parents moved onto a piece of her property, which is actually our original Indian land allotment from Trail of Tears to today that we still live on, and so that they could take care of her. Now she's 96 and she's still got more energy than I do some days. But we have a lot of fun. I graduated from Forum High School, and then I continued on to OSU Okmulgee and had an awesome time there, received my associates in business management, and then I continued to OSU Stillwater. And from Stillwater, I went to OSU Tulsa, so I kind of just ran the OSU circuit.
You've tried 3 out of the 4 campuses.
Yeah.
The main campuses. Well, so tell me when, well, let's back up a little bit actually. Let's go back to the land allotment because I think that's really interesting. And maybe talk a little bit about what you know of that history. How big is the allotment? I mean, when did your family first come over? Anything you know about that?
There are actually 2 separate Indian land allotments, and they are on 2 different sections. They're less than a mile apart. One was given to my great-grandmother, and one belonged to my great-great-grandmother. I had to think about that for a second. Anyway, they're both 80-acre parcels, so there's, it's 160 acres in between, and my family, for ages and ages until my grandmother got into retirement age, had always farmed cotton and soy and lots of things on that, and it has always been something that the family returned to keep sustenance and to also kind of keep their culture alive. Mm-hmm. If we didn't have such strong ties on both sides of my family to our Cherokee heritage, I think I would be a very different person. My father's family, my great-great-grandmother was actually Sally Manning Ross, which is Chief John Ross's daughter-in-law. And so, one of my first interesting cooking experiences was my mom pulling down this really, really old cookbook. And I started flipping through it, and the pages were starting to fall out, and they had gotten yellowed. And all these women throughout the years had written things into this cookbook. And there was actually a little note that Sally had put in the cookbook, and it was actually on one side it was her cornbread recipe, and on the other side it was the Cherokee legend of the corn. And so it was just kind of neat how she did that, and so other people kind of caught on to that, and they would add like a little story next to their recipe through the years. And so just little things like that in the family has been interesting for my perspective and my personal growth, I think, over time.
That's an amazing thing to find.
Yeah.
So was it a home-written cookbook, or was it a mixture between like a commercial cookbook and a...
It had been rebound. I don't know what the original binding had looked like, but it looks almost like a 3-ring binder, only a really, really, really old 3-ring binder. And they had covered it with leather, so I don't know what the original inside of that looks like, but it's very interesting.
Yeah. Besides the cornbread, what were some of the ones that you were drawn to, the recipes in there you were drawn to?
Well, one of my favorites has always been, my grandmother makes blackberry dumplings, which are the most wonderful things ever. And then we would make homemade ice cream and serve it with them. And so it looks like, you'd think a chicken and dumpling kind of thing, only it's with blackberries and it's creamy, and the dumplings are like cobbler pieces, and oh my gosh, one of my favorite meals ever.
I think I just drooled a little bit. That sounds really good. I've never had a blackberry dumpling.
And she put in there a story of the reason why we never mowed or brush hogged a certain part of the pasture, and it's because, there's a trail of berries, or different types of berry bushes that we always kept, and as kids, everybody went out there and picked berries forever, and we would come home purple, but we would have so much because we wanted those dumplings so bad.
Nice. Covered in chiggers and all, I'm sure.
Oh, yes.
So is that one that you make often, or is there one that you like to make yourself from that cookbook?
There has been different things that I've thought of adding, but I still haven't found, the one perfect recipe that, I want to put in there, because there's not a whole lot of space left in there, because there's probably 20 or 30 women who have written in it over time. And so I'm like, what's next?
Exactly. I'm glad you're going to add to it, though. I think sounds like it's really important, but holy cow, that's amazing. You have to let us know when you decide what your recipe is. We'll have to add it into the file for this interview, because I'm sure people listening to this are going to want to know at some point. Or at least I.
It's really interesting. When I was 14 years old, I competed for a Native American Women in Agriculture to be the national representative for them. And I wrote an essay, and the title, they gave you a title for your essay, and then you were just supposed to write the essay, and it was Native American Women in Agriculture, Past, Present, and Future. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, well, how do I do this? And I actually, because I had recently just, learned about the cookbook and had been going over it, I actually wrote the story of the corn in there, and, I wrote some of the things that women had put over the years. When I got toward the very end, I thought about it for a really long time. How do I wrap this up about all these different women in my family and all the things that we've learned over the years? And so I just put, I'm thankful for the gentle, steadfast, feminine gene pool I come from. It's truly American, because I couldn't come up with words to, describe so many different people, and some of them I've never even met before. So it was kind of tricky but fun, but I won. So after that, I actually got to spend, I won the competition multiple times, and I actually got to spend the next 7 years as the national representative for Native American Women in Agriculture. And it was neat to travel to different tribal events and speak to women and learn about their concerns for their tribes. And I actually got to meet women from over 30 different tribes, and I'm still friends with a lot of them to this day, and it's been really interesting to see how people have grown and changed since, you're a young teenager to today. Mm-hmm. And how different things have happened, throughout the different states.
So, how old were you when you became the representative for that?
14.
Oh, so it was when you were 14 when you won that?
Yeah. From the time I was 14 till I was 21.
That's amazing. So where all did you go?
The first one, I got to go to Hollywood, Florida, and that was super fun. I learned several things on them, one of which was to always read the signs on the beach before you go. I kept seeing things on the beach, but I didn't know what they were. And I was just with my mother, and it was just the two of us, and I had went out and we were swimming in the ocean because I had never swam in the ocean, and I looked back and I was like, what are those things on the beach? And finally we went to get out of the water, and we realized they were jellyfish, and there was a sign that said, "Caution, British man-o'-war." no swimming, and we were like, oh my goodness, that's not very good.
I can't believe you didn't get stung.
I was just like, thank you, God. I promise I'll read next time.
Lesson learned. So Hollywood, Florida. So what did you think about that? At 14 being appointed to be the National Native American Women of Agricultural spokesperson or representative. So what was your job? Like, what were your thoughts about it, and what was your actual job to do?
Part of it was just learning the different issues that women were lobbying for throughout the different states, things that were really affecting women in their different types of employ. A lot of, treaty and tribal rights issues were brought up, but one of the things that just amazed me was, I know this sounds terrible, but learning to get out of my comfort zone and get out of the box, because that meant that I had to give speeches. That meant I had to go and present myself in a professional manner to other people I had never met before. And it also meant that, when I walked into the Navajo Nation, I smiled and shook everybody's hand, and they looked at me, "You're the representative?" So my opening line eventually became, "Hi, my name's Callie Connolly. I'm redheaded and freckled faced, but I am your national representative, and let me tell you why." And then, I would talk to them for a little bit, and, it was never an issue. But I thought, in my perceptions, I thought, oh, maybe that'll be a big issue, but never it was a problem, just because everybody was united in so many common goals, and everyone wants the best for their family and their children and their state and their country. And so facing those issues and trying to come up with ways around different challenges, united everybody in a common goal. Yeah. So it was really neat.
So what were some of those issues? Do you remember some that stuck out to you?
We had a lot of water rights issues. Some places, California, Arizona, places where there's a lot of drought. You're not allowed to catch rainwater in a lot of states. There are restrictions on using certain cultural things. You have to, like here in the state of Oklahoma, if you want eagle feathers and you're going to use these in a tribal way, you have to contact somebody, and you get the feathers are sent to you from an observatory. And there are a lot of little details that people don't think about. But one of the things that I just blew my mind was women who had to learn so many new technologies to cope with the sheer amount that people are expected to produce, in today's agricultural market. There's not a lot of opportunity for them to keep small farming operations going in traditional ways unless they start incorporating some technology. So then it became, well, how do we get grants? How do we get funding to get these technologies to these women so that they can expand their operation and continue with sustaining their family's livelihood? So that was a lot of the challenges, and some of it was just, there are a lot of issues with treaties, and you had to work with the government to figure out where a boundary of a property actually ended, because on one document it would be completely different than another document. And so it was very interesting to see what came of those situations. It was really nice to see how much people grew in their thinking on all sides as they dealt with issues that they had never even thought of before. There were issues that, not even on the tribal side, on the government side, that I didn't realize that some of the things the government had to go through to be able to help people and some of their officials. So it was really interesting.
That is really complicated too. I mean, it sounds like, I'm trying to imagine you as a mid to late teenager sort of being confronted and having a lot of these situations described. What was your role, or what was your capacity to try and affect change or find solutions? What were the expectations?
Mostly what I did is I came in and presented myself as a sounding board, and sometimes it's neat to just have someone who has had no experience with a particular situation come in and give an outside perspective. And sometimes it helps people find common ground if there's a lot of frustrations or feuding in a situation. But a lot of the things that I did was really just to promote leadership in communities, to go and give speeches, and then also give people resources of, this is where you can go to find help building your resume. This is what you could possibly do to plug a gap. I know that you've been farming this entire time, and you want to also show that you've got another job, or you've done this or you've done that. And so it was neat, especially people who have lived on reservations. They have a very different set of things, or a tribal town, depending on whether or not they are interacting a lot with the environment outside of that, how they have to transfer to different cultures, the way that they word things even sometimes. Because, something as simple as not making eye contact when you go to college as a student would blow somebody's mind. A professor might be aggravated or think a student's not paying attention or someone's not really giving them respect, but culturally, a lot of Native Americans not making eye contact is actually a form of respect, and that means that they are listening to you and they're being very attentive. So, there are a lot of neat things that I stumbled upon that I had never even imagined, because every culture was so vastly different.
That just seems like I'm still just thinking about being a teenager and absorbing all of that. It's just, it sounds like you did a really good job. So, obviously you took away from a lot of it, so you were being a good representative and thoughtful. Were there anything that from those experiences that you came across that you felt like you were able to help find a resolution for?
Yeah, there were several different things. Also, there are a lot of tribal resources that people may not utilize or even know exist. There are wonderful land grant opportunities. There are wonderful things that you can do that I just had no idea were out there. There are a lot of my biggest deal in what I do now is I publish a monthly newsletter of all the scholarships that are coming up in the next 2 months. And I try to get as many of those together as possible, not just for my Native American students, but for everyone, because people seem to not realize the resources that they have available to them. When I was in high school, my mom had said over and over again, I know you want to go to college, and I want you to be able to go to college, but I don't have the ability to send you there. When I was 7 years old, my father had a stroke, and so he was unable to work. And eventually, because he was such a large man and we were unable to transfer him, he had to spend most of his time in the nursing home. Then we would, come and pick him up and go places and stuff. But in the evening, because of his medical issues, he had to have nursing care around the clock. And so that was interesting, but that also made my mother have a lot of single mom challenges. And so I knew I had to figure out some way to get scholarships. And so I wound up just going from associates to bachelor's, and completing that part, I wound up with over $60,000 in scholarships and grants. And so I was so blessed with that. I just had to learn, if you look hard enough, you can find something for anything. I think one of my first and silliest things that I ever got, I got a $250 savings bond because I went to the Arkansas-Oklahoma State Fair and blew the biggest bubble at the Hubba Bubba booth. There's some silly things out there, but believe it or not, whatever interest you have, there's usually a scholarship for it.
So did you go to the Arkansas-Oklahoma State Fair thinking that I'm going to blow the biggest bubble at the Hubba Bubba booth?
No, I went there thinking I'm going to get out of class today. And then I stumbled on that, and then it got me thinking, I wonder what other kinds of weird things are out there. And so I got to find lots of interesting things.
That's what I was going to ask, if there was someone that helped direct you towards those resources, or if you felt like you were doing all that by yourself.
Well, I didn't have My school was in transition, so our counselor was new at our high school. And so I did not have a lot of people to pull on for resources, so I just made friends with Google. That's how I think eventually wound up at librarians, because I got to be awesome at search engines. and I started keeping a list because I realized how many other people around me were having serious issues, and friends when I was going to college, with financing their education. And I thought, oh, if I can keep all this information, if I can get it to people as much as possible, it would be awesome. You know, something as simple as the Make Me Laugh scholarship, where you come up with a joke and you video it and send it in. You know, you could get $2,000 for that. You know, there's some interesting things out there.
Yeah. That is really interesting. So were you keeping that list and starting a distribution list when you were starting your associate's degree then?
Well, I would normally just send stuff around to my friends if they had to ask about it, and then kind of it grew. And I'm so glad that Oklahoma State lets you keep your login, your email for life, because that's allowed me to keep in touch with so many people that I probably would have lost their email addresses over time. And I still have people that, you know, I haven't seen in 3 or 4 years contact me and say, hey, my daughter's getting ready to go to school, or hey, my sister is, you know, switching from this campus to this campus and suddenly the financial aid's run dry. Do you know what's coming up? And then once I actually started working for Connor State College, I kind of took over a organization that had been kind of dead on campus for about 20 years. Some people say 30 years, I don't know for sure. I still haven't got the solid number on that. But it was the Native American Student Association, and that was something that I had participated in when I was at OSU, and I thought this is a very, very important thing, since we have, you know, 40% of our students are Native American at Connors. And so I talked to some people and we worked on that, and we got that revived on campus. And so the students that participated in that self-identified as Native American, you know, I made sure I got as many Native American scholarship opportunities to them as possible. And I wound up doing a financial aid workshop and partnering with the financial aid department at the college, and we had people come in from area high schools, just anyone who's, you know, willing to learn a little bit. You know, we walked them through the FAFSA and some tips and tricks on that. I gave them handouts on how to make essay writing as easy as possible. And then I also gave them a lot of handouts to scholarship search engines. And then I asked them when they came in, would you fill out this card with, you know, what major you plan on going for? And so then after the workshops were over, I would go back and look up information, you know, in my ginormous access document that I've created of scholarships, and I would look up everything for those students who had said they had certain majors in mind. So if it was nursing, I would look up everything that I had about nursing, and I would email it to that student. So it kind of gave people resources. I don't feel like we have a lot of time and energy put into that, at least in my small area. And so I really try to make sure that our students that are coming in from the high schools and other areas have as much available to them as possible when I can.
Yeah. I'm really impressed that you have an access database with all of this information in it. I just think that is amazing, but it sounds like it is par for the course for your personality, you know, having this sort of in your teenage years taken on this role as you called it a sounding board, but it's also that information connector, right? So you were taking information you learned from all your travel, and when you found a problem, trying to connect that person with that other information.
Yeah.
It sounds like that's something that you're really good and committed to doing. I wonder a little bit about I'm trying to decide where to start with OSU, because I think now is a good time to sort of back up to that. So maybe let's go all the way back to your associate's degree at OSU. Okmulgee, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what made you choose OSU Okmulgee? What did you do while you were there? All that good stuff.
Well, at that time, I had originally planned to go straight to Stillwater, but at that time, my father was in bad health and I wanted to be closer to home. And he did wind up passing away my freshman year. And so I wanted to be closer to home, but it wound up being one of the best choices I think I ever made. I stayed on campus. Believe it or not, they have an amazing international population of international students there on that campus. And there were such a diverse set of people in the dorms that we had so much fun. I mean, from silly things to Saturday nights sitting out in the foyer and playing poker, and we were playing poker with our card money, because you put money on a lunch card or whatever, and so whoever lost that day the worst had to buy pizza for us the next go round. That was the way that we did things, and we had a lot of fun. But from the great activities that were on campus to the awesome professors that we had there, I was so impressed. So many people had come in from working in the field, whatever field that they were teaching. Like I had an accountant teacher who worked at a Big 8 accounting firm for ages and ages. And now that he had retired from that, he was teaching at OSU. And originally, I could not even imagine taking his class. I knew I had to for my major, but everyone was completely terrified of him, and it wasn't because he was mean or gruff or anything like that. It was because his class was really, really hard. But because he had all that experience behind him, he was able to give people very real life scenarios, and he would give us real companies books, and you would do everything by hand on how to, what's the ROI on this investment, and it would be very detailed. And not everybody usually passed accounting 1 to get into accounting 2, but by the time you left accounting 2 and you made it to any other classes or into life, it was like the easiest thing ever, because by the time you could use Excel and different spreadsheets, you were like, I've got this, no problem. So there's a lot of great professors and a lot of people who were really dedicated to what they were doing and really actually were invested in the students there. Really, that was the story across all of OSU campuses, and I think that's what really made me, the poke for life. When my child eventually comes into this world, I will try to indoctrinate them to be an OSU graduate one day.
They're in the family now anyway. They don't have a choice. They have to have lots of orange. Your baby, I'm sure, will have plenty of orange. I'm only 4 months pregnant, and I've already had people buy me OSU baby stuff, so, it happens. It's a good sign. It's a good sign. Well, so why did you choose OSU then? I mean, because you were looking at this from you were, sort of actively funding this yourself through scholarships and grants that you were accumulating. So in theory, you could have chosen anywhere you wanted to go. So what was the draw to OSU?
Well, I did a couple of interesting things. OU, at the time that I was a 9th grader, they were still doing a camp that was on Lake Texoma, and which is actually where I met my husband. I'm a little dork like that. I met him at a science camp. He was there because he had to be. I was there because I wanted to be, that kind of thing. But I had a lot of fun, and I met a lot of wonderful and interesting people there. But I also began going to different events with FFA when I was in high school. And so as an Aggie, FFA is very, very intricately intertwined with OSU. I made so many connections and had so many friends that were just amazing people going to OSU that I thought, oh, I've got to go up there and be with these people, because I had been to so many different OSU camps and summer camps and things throughout high school and junior high, that I thought, this is just the place for me. This is where it fits. Mm-hmm. And I had thought about going to other colleges in other states, but that just seemed the right thing to do. It just was comfortable.
Mm-hmm. So what was your Let me think how to phrase this as well. What was your interest in FFA?
Well, originally, I had taken too many classes. I started doing concurrent enrollment when I was a sophomore, and I had taken too many classes, and so I could have graduated early. And so I needed to take more things to fill my day. And I had talked to a teacher. He was the FFA teacher is the person who actually had me originally do the essay for the Native American Women in Agriculture and all that. And so he said, well, come on in here. I know that you did a area speech for our VFW, last month. Why don't you come in and try to do speech, because we don't have very many people who compete in speaking here. So I went in and I started doing public speaking, and eventually I wound up doing a little bit of everything. I was horticulture, floriculture, I was showing, I was judging, I was in everything, and I was an officer. And my junior and senior year, because I had taken so many classes, half of my day was spent both junior year and senior year as the aide for the ag teacher. And so I had, my freshman, my 8th grade, and sophomore boys that I loved to death, but oh my goodness, I thought, it's like being with my nephews all the time. Had a lot of fun. Learned a lot of things about 8th grade boys I didn't want to know.
Sure, it didn't take very long either. So you ended up, that was more your senior year, and how you spent the last year?
My junior and senior year.
And senior. Did you show anything during that time?
Yes, I showed lambs, and I learned a lot. Oh my goodness. I thought I could have been a hairstylist by the time I learned all the different ways to shear sheep. By the end of that, I thought, I've got this. I can do this.
You never know when that talent's going to come in handy.
Yeah, you never know.
Did you ever win anything?
Yes and no. On the showing the sheep, I got a couple of showmanship awards, but my sheep, when I finally got to the regional competition, I did okay in a district competition, got to the regional competition my senior year and got sifted, so it was like, oh shucks. But at that point, I didn't really care. I was in love with my animal, and it was just almost a pet at that point. My nieces and nephews, who were 5, 6, 7, some of them, they walked it around with its little harness, like it was a dog or whatever, and they would give it treats and it would follow them around, and it was just somehow became a pet more than a show animal at that point.
I like it. I'm sure that's how I would do too. Okay, just curious. Just trying to picture the FFA Callie and what animal was next to you, so that's helpful and that makes sense.
In 110-degree weather, I can do anything in high heels and black hosiery after FFA. I learned a lot, and that was one of the strange things. I also learned to carry a sewing kit at all times, because no matter what happened, someone always lost a button or had a problem or this or that or the other. So eventually everybody started calling me Mom. And so much so that I dreaded it a little bit. But finally, one of the students from a Newcastle FFA chapter said, okay, whatever is in your purse, because I carried a huge purse, whatever is in your purse, he's like, I've got it this time. You can't beat me. And I'm like, I can't beat you. On what? He said, I bet you can't pull a rabbit out of there. And I fished around and I found a little rabbit earring and held it up. And so I was just the survival bag purse lady.
I love it.
The whole time.
I think that's probably extended to, that as a metaphor has extended onto you in your career as well, I think. I like it. Okay, so you went to OSU Okmulgee for 2 years and got your associate in business, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So then you decided to go on to the Stillwater campus. Talk me through that a little bit.
Well, when I went on to the Stillwater campus, originally I was going in for ag business, and somehow or another I kept winding up taking marketing classes, and I took a lot of economics classes, and finally my advisor said, are you sure that ag business is what you want to do? he said, I know that you already have an associate's in business. And I said, well, yeah. And he said, well, look at all the classes that you're choosing. You know, in your opportunities, you could have chosen this or this or this or this or this. He said, all the time you are always choosing marketing. And I said, well, those are my favorite classes. And he said, well, what do you think about changing your major to a marketing major, because it's everything that you have been interested in. And so I talked to him for a little while, and I went and talked to someone from the Spear School of Business, because at that time, you know, I was in the ag college, and I wound up making the switch, but not before he got to put me in one last class. And oh my goodness, I've told 100 people and then some about his last class. Aboriginal Studies was the name of the class. That was a weekend class. And so I thought it was going to be kind of a history type class. But I thought, oh, I just need one more hour to be full-time for my financial aid. And so we decided to do this class on the weekend. And it was a brand new to OSU, and it was the first time that it had been taught. And he enrolled me in it. I loved him and hated him and teased him for it forever after that. But I showed up at the classroom building that I was supposed to be at in a pair of heels, because I thought, you know, at lunch I'll go meet with somebody else, and I was trying to get an internship and have an interview that day and all this other stuff. I show up, Aboriginal Studies. I didn't understand why you had to pay an extra $50 for an unknown object. It was for a knife. So you got a knife, and then they took us out to the OSU camp, you know, where you can, you know, swing down the stuff on the bungee cord and all this other stuff. It was a survival class. And so there went the heels, and it was lots of fun.
Were you wearing a dress?
Yes. I had on a skirt and heels, and I went out there, and I was like, I'm going to kill this advisor. I can't believe he did this to me. I'm going to have to give him a hard time at least. But I got out there, and it was 2 days of being out at the camp and learning how to find clean water and learning how to start a fire and learning how to build your own shelter and all of these things. And it was a wonderful and awesome class, and I was so glad that I had taken it. But on the flip side of that, I thought, I wish I was warned. So, of course, you know, I came back and gave him a hard time. He was like, well, you're the only one who has ever taken that I've had before, and I didn't know. I'm so sorry. But
so what did the class, the person in charge of that class, did they act strangely to you when you showed up in interview clothes?
Well, he kind of cocked his head and crossed his arms, and I wasn't the only one who had no clue what was going on. You know, there were 3 or 4 other people that, you know, they were in flip-flops, or they were in, you know, just a tank top and shorts and flimsy flip-flops or whatever, and so they weren't really prepared or dressed for that particular event, but we had fun. Hey, and at least I had I still had my survival kit with my purse, so I still had my wonderful little handy-dandy sewing kit that I pulled out, and I actually turned my skirt into kind of shorts, a skirt or something like that when I was out there, because I could not move or run or do anything.
Of course you did.
It was fun.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I can totally see this. That's the thing. I've known you for like no time at all, and I can picture you doing this.
The teacher thought that was one of the most hilarious things that he had seen.
Do you remember who taught that class?
I can't remember.
It's totally okay. I'm just curious. Do you remember who your advisor was?
Yeah, but now I told a story on him, so I better not name his name. He might get on to me.
I suspect he doesn't mind that story. That story is just fine.
It was awesome.
I wonder, did you get the internship you applied for during your lunch break?
No, because there was not a lunch break. It was a continued thing, and so I had to actually call someone, and they made us leave our cell phones at this little stop at the beginning, and so I had to call someone and get a hold of them and say, I cannot believe what has just happened. And thankfully it was someone who was very understanding. I eventually got the internship. I just had to apply for it and come and interview 2 weeks later after that.
That's good that it worked out that way.
But it was interesting.
So that was your last as an ag business major?
Yeah, that was my last class.
That's a way to go out. So then you moved to what?
I went to moved from the Ag College to the Spears School of Business there at Stillwater and started working on my marketing degree. And then I found out a little bit later after the next semester that I had got the internship, and it was actually it's a building that's right beside the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Tulsa, and it was working for Cherokee Nation businesses as a PR intern. And so I moved to Tulsa at that time and started working down there and switched over to OSU Tulsa. But the semester right there before I left, I also had another amazing class. There is a lady, and I will never ever forget her face, but I cannot remember her name. I'm horrible with names. That's why I always have all these lists and things so that I can go back and find out.
You see my pile of notes here, yes.
Anyway, she taught a sociology class, and the sociology class was amazing. For whatever reason, we wound up with a really, really diverse group of people in there. And, the whole class was about pushing boundaries. And so, people were able to ask questions of other people from other cultures or other ethnicities without any repercussions. And we were able to get into some very in-depth discussions. But it was the earliest class ever. Who offers a 7:30 class? It was a 2-day-a-week, but it was at 7:30 in the morning. And it was horrible for being at 7:30, and then it became one of my favorite classes that I will never forget, because the group of students became so close in that class because we were in such detailed and in-depth discussions that I'm still friends with some of those people to this day, because we were so connected in so many personal opinions and things that we actually got to be friends. Mm-hmm. And so it was really an interesting and controversial class at the same time. Sometimes she'd have you take if your opinion on one subject was one thing, your job was to represent the other side. She did all kinds of fun things, but I loved it.
This leads me to want to explore something, so bear with me. Mm-hmm. You mentioned when you were the women's ag representative that when you would go to different tribes, the first thing that you could tell by their first reaction to you was that you weren't what they expected visually, right? Mm-hmm. So I wonder if in your sociology, probably sociology of race or sociology of whatever the class was mm-hmm. titled, I wonder if that experience, your personal experience with that, took on a new dimension or was representative in that class at all.
I was actually the only Native American student in that class. And so, first of all, you can never ask any Native American to be representative of all tribes, because there's over 500 federally recognized tribes and countless others that are not currently recognized. And so, I can't represent the thousands of cultures across a huge continent. But I could relate what my personal experiences were, and so that was kind of an eye-opener for some people, because people often thought, that, someone in California or Texas or New York that were Native American would have the exact same perspective as me, and I'm like, no, because everybody's got their own life experiences and culture that they bring with them. And so it was really interesting to hear what people's perceptions were, and to also realize that some of my perceptions about other people were completely wrong or completely off. And so it was a lot of fun.
Sounds like a beneficial class. How big was it?
I want to say, I cannot believe how big it wound up. I want to say it was like 17 or 18. And that seems, I know that was small, but that seemed huge to me for a 7:30 in the morning class. But most of them, I'll be honest, were basketball players. And I don't know if they got mad, their coach got mad at them or their advisor did or something, but somehow they wound up in this 7:30 in the morning class. And so it was a bunch of basketball players and then a few other people who happened to take the class, and so it was fun.
Interesting. Do you remember some of the examples of some of the people that came in as guests that you were allowed to just sort of ask questions to?
We actually didn't have any guests come in. There was enough. Let's just say most of the races were covered, at least from that campus, and we had several international students in there, and so somehow or another, it just wound up like the perfect mix of people. And I don't know if any of the advisors had any idea that they had done that, but it was like one of the most interesting classes I think I've ever had.
Interesting. Thank you. So that was one of the last classes you took before you moved to Tulsa.
Yes.
So how long were you in Stillwater?
I left Stillwater beginning of, no, it was the end of 2010. I couldn't remember if it was spring 2011 or fall 2010. But
So when did you enter OOHRP?
right after high school in 2008.
2008. So 2008, and then you were in Stillwater in 2009. Is that right?
Yep.
And then 2009 to 2010 in Stillwater. Did you work any place on campus while you were in Stillwater?
Yeah, I worked what they called the equipment room or whatever. It was intramural equipment manager, I think was like the actual title, but it was a work study position. And oh my goodness, it was a very hilarious thing to be able to be there for all the, and sometimes I was a referee and stuff, but it was very interesting to be there for all the different intramural events. Oh my goodness, and the competitions were so fun.
What were some of the examples of that?
I think one of my favorite moments was when there were two different teams and neither one of them had any idea how to play the game. And so the referees were like out there teaching them how to play the game before they started the game, and then it was just, it was chaos and lots of fun.
Do you remember what game that was?
It was wall ball.
Oh, wow.
And then someone at one point got aggravated, and and then it became people ball.
Were they playing, there's one that's really hilarious to watch on the lawn in front of the library now. It's like bubble soccer. Were they doing that then?
Yeah, they had just started that, and I never was a ref for one of those. I got to check out equipment and watch that, and it was very interesting.
I'll go stand at the window to watch that one.
Yeah.
Okay. So you moved to Tulsa then, and what was your OSU Tulsa experience? Talk me through a little bit of that.
OSU Tulsa, because I was having real world experience during the daytime as an intern, and what was so awesome is I had the most amazing bosses in the world, and one of which I actually begged to come down and do one of our programs recently at the library. She came down and did our Women's History Month presentation. But I was working directly under the people who were the heads of Cherokee Nation businesses in the marketing department and the PR, and they also dealt with all the crisis management. And so anytime something crazy or random happened, I got to see how people dealt with that and how speeches were written, how different things were handled, both politically and professionally. And it was just so neat to be able to sit under people who had so many different things going on. And I was just the girl who, my job was to go through all the newspapers in the state of Oklahoma every day and cut out all the articles about Cherokee Nation and decide whether it was positive, negative, or neutral press. And then I went through a bunch of blogs and I'd go through all these different things, but I was just there to record how much press we got each day, what it was, and send out a report. And that was pretty much my whole job. But I also got to do some interesting things, like there was a wonderful program that they were doing off of the Hard Rock, which was in the building right next to mine. And Cherokee Nation Businesses is the holding company for Cherokee Nation Entertainment, which has all the casinos in it. But at the Hard Rock, that's what I was so impressed with the cameras for. I got to spend one afternoon on the 13th story, the 13th story of the Hard Rock, hanging off of the building upside down and backwards with a harness on and holding a camera and videoing Chief and other people as they rappelled down the side of the building. And it was to raise money for the Special Olympics. But Yeah, I was very lightheaded when I finished that project, but I had the best time, and then they allowed us to rappel down afterwards. But I had some really fun experiences, and then when I would go into marketing classes and I would go into business classes and they would talk about crisis management or media relations or all these different things, I was able to relate that to my job experience. And so, having a great internship made that so much more important to me, and I was able to learn so much more, I think, just because I had relatable experiences that I could turn it around to.
It sounds like that's true. How did they present this opportunity to you to hang upside down out from a building?
Well, there was the person who was originally doing the camera, and she had shot several people, and then it was her turn to go down because she had raised money for the Special Olympics, and it was her turn to go down and bungee down the side of the Hard Rock. And so they turned around and they're like, she's doing this, you need to do this, and all this other stuff. And they're like, Callie, come here. I'm like, that was what it was. It was, Callie, come here. Do you think that you can do this? And I'm like, if I get sick, I'll let you know. So then the next thing I know, I was strapped in a harness and hanging upside down and backwards and trying to video people as they rappelled down the Hard Rock.
That's something for your resume. Good job. So I have a question about your work with the Cherokee business. Sounds like it did provide like that sort of real world founding that you always hope an internship does, right? That basis of really understanding. So I wonder two things. The first is, did you have a lot of interaction with the Cherokee tribe before working for them as an entity?
Well, yes, and also because I am Cherokee, and so I've always, went to Heritage Days, and my mother was a Head Start teacher for Cherokee Nation for a bajillion years, and since then she has worked for Choctaw Nation. All of my job experiences so far, before I started working at Connors, has always been working for a tribe. So it has been really interesting going into this Title III program. But after I left Cherokee Nation Businesses, we kept extending the internship. It was only supposed to be like a 6-month internship, and it turned into like almost a 3-year internship. It went on for a long time. But then I started working actually at the Hard Rock, and they eventually transferred me down to Cherokee Casino, Fort Gibson, which is how I got back down in this area. But I was managing Players Club. And so we had a lot of fun, and I got to learn a whole new field of interest there, and some of the neat rules that casinos and different places go by. But what I loved is they also had friction and entertainment venues and the joint where big name bands would come in and play, and I just got to see on the marketing aspect of that how they were able to reach all these people and how they were able to grow a business, and I just think I learned a lot.
Yeah.
Overall.
I think that was my second part of the question, is sort of what made up your job there. I mean, what were some of the day-to-day functions? So it sounds like it was varied.
Yeah, I'm kind of the figure this out person, usually wherever I wind up.
So what made you make the leap from working for the tribal business to Connors State?
Well, one of the things that made me decide, well, I always thought, I'm currently pursuing my master's degree at OSU, of course.
Tulsa or Okmulgee or?
Tulsa.
Okay, got it.
But as I went back, I thought I want to be a teacher at the college level. And Connors was a nearby place, and it just happened to have a position in the library open, and I was looking at area jobs and trying to get a little bit closer to home. I loved working where I was working, but at that time my husband and I had been talking, and we wanted to start a family, and in the environment that I was working in, I probably didn't need to be working in a heavy smoke environment and trying to conceive. So we talked about that, and I decided to get another job that was a little bit closer to home. And there was a position open at Connors State College in the library as a library technician. And I read entirely too much. I may have an addiction, so much so that I blog on several different review websites, and so I get, free advanced copies of books from Amazon and different things for an honest review and all that other stuff. But I read entirely too much, and I thought, well, this may be a good way to get into academia. And so I applied, and that took off, and I have had the most wonderful time ever since. I went through the Oklahoma Department of Libraries and got my certification as a public librarian, and I learned a lot through that. I also learned how to reach so many more resources than I already had, and so it allowed me to collect more information, more things that I could pass on to people that would contact me every now and again of, where can I find this, or how do I do this, or how do I do that. And while I was there, I learned, we had a bunch of archives, but no one ever accessed them. And so that became part of my project. I started doing basically social media management for the library, and now we've got to where we reach over 10,000 people every month through our different social media with informative articles and things out of our databases. And also the archives, I tagged, Connors State College has a wonderful alumni page, and so I would tag the alumni page, and then I would take the old Conroe yearbooks that are, 1967, 1966, these really old yearbooks where they used to have a full Connors yearbook, and I would copy the class pictures, and then I would post them on our social media so that people could go back and see some of the things that Connors had done through the years. And so many people got to find things about their relatives or their mom or dad or sister or friend. And so then I started getting a lot of requests for archive information, and so that became a interesting thing. We started really digging into our archives more and getting information out to people, and so we would have people call sometimes from other states. One of my best friends just passed away, and we're trying to find some information about when they were younger and some pictures and this and that and the other, and we would find as much information as we possibly could and get to people. And some of it was just fun stuff. Somebody would say, oh, my parents met at Connors and they're having an anniversary dinner, a 30th anniversary dinner, and we thought it would be awesome if we could find pictures of them when they were still in college. And so we'd go back and we'd find pictures of them and the different clubs and things that they were in. So it was a lot of fun.
So you're doing social media, archival reference, and just standard library tech duties? Yeah,
I do cataloging. I'm a little bit of everywhere.
It's a lot of skills. Really quick before I forget, when did you graduate from OSU Tulsa with your undergraduate?
2012.
And what was it just straight up business? That's where you landed, business marketing, right?
Yes, I got my degree in marketing, or my bachelor's in marketing.
In business school. What are you going for your master's?
Right now I'm currently working on my data mining certificate, and then I am juggling and trying to decide on the master's where that's going to land. I was looking at my MBA, and then I thought, well, maybe I'll do this and maybe I'll do that. And then I was looking also at, because I spent so much time at the library, but my heart was broken because I found out there was not an ALA accredited librarian's degree at OSU. And so I thought, well, I could go to OU, but I could try another degree instead.
Just to say OSU. A lot of our OSU librarians have had to go to OU to get their library degrey.
So if anybody out there is listening, and you can nudge them toward that, right. It would be nice.
Information. I think there's some museum leaning things, but that's about it. So is your data mining certificate through OSU Tulsa then? Is that what you're, okay. All right, so you're still deciding on your master's degree though. You'll pick a good one. I know it. I can feel it. Okay, so coming back to starting to work at Connor State as a library tech, talk me through how you got from there to where you are in the position you're starting now.
I don't know how it happens, but usually I wind up starting at a job doing one thing, and then it just evolves into something completely different. And so I started there as a library tech, and I had so much fun assisting students, and I learned that a lot of the students, because I was a tutor while I was going to college, a lot of the students at tutoring center closed early, but the library would still be open. And so then we had students that would come over for tutoring, and I would help them to the point that I could, and then I would have to find other resources. And so I dealt with that a lot, and then someone just happened to mention one day in passing, well, we have a Facebook page, and that's all that we have, but we only get like 12 or 20 people that get on there a month, but we would really like to do something to get people to access our databases more, and try to help people learn how to even just use our search engine, our browser, and know what resources we have available. So, I created an entire social media marketing plan, so every day of the week has its own little thing. We've got Segue Sunday, Motivation Monday, Trivia Tuesday, What's New Wednesday, Thinking Thursday, Funny Friday, and Flashback Friday because it's got our archive information. And then because I was collecting all the scholarship stuff, we did a scholarship Saturday and a silly Saturday. So, there's 2 posts a day, but it was a way for us to highlight all the different library resources that people had available to them. The What's New Wednesday, what were our new bestsellers, what were our new things that we had just come in. And all of a sudden, people started realizing more and more often, because a lot of people may not come into the library, but they may be on their Facebook or Twitter or some of these other social media methods, and when they see, oh hey, this is available to me and it's free, I always tell them, you're paying for it, you've got your tuition, you pay for it and all your fees, so come and use as much as you can. And so after they started seeing all the things that were accessible to them, they started getting interested, and our numbers started going up on a lot of things. And so the social media has been really an interesting tool. A lot of alumni have come back and asked questions and needed help with things.
Yeah, it's always amazing to me how you can make those alumni connections just through photographs and just some of that flashback stuff. It's a great tool. So talk to me about the program you're starting with NASA. Walk me through how you ended up.
Well, that actually happened. I had been working for Connors for less than a month, and somebody had brought up the fact that we still didn't have anything for Native Americans on campus, and I had noticed that, but that we had Native American Student Association in the past, and someone found an old quilt that they had made, when you lay over a table or a booth or something so that you have a pretty quilt, and someone had made a beautiful quilt. I don't know who it is, but thank you for making such a wonderful quilt. And so they had a student organization fair, and it was the beginning of the fall semester, and I thought, well, I'll talk to some people, and some other people were interested in this getting restarted on campus. And so I just made a booth and draped the quilt over the top of the booth and showed up at the student organization fair and had a sign up sheet where people could leave their information and join the organization. We didn't charge any dues. I don't want finances to be a hindrance, for the program. And because a lot of people don't realize this, but there are a lot of tribes that have certain blood quantums and certain requirements, that someone may be Native American, but they may not fit the particular requirements for their tribe. And so they may not be people who are in possession of a CDIB card, but they are Native American, and they do have the culture, the roots, the ancestry, and they still have the same problems when they come into a college campus that the other Native American students do. And so I just made sure that it was something that they got to self-identify as Native. It was not a requirement that you had a CDIB card or any of this other stuff. And so the group kept growing, and then we actually had a couple of students that loved so many of the activities that we were doing that we kind of adopted them, and they are They are now official NASA members, but they are not Native American. And what they did is they come to our beading workshops and basket weaving, and they got to see some of the different activities that we had done and things that we had planned to do. And they got so involved and having so much fun that they said, can we just stay and keep coming? And so they would show up to our meetings every month, and we just adopted them in, and it's been a lot of fun. Connors has received the Title III Native American grant, which is awesome, and they received the full $5 million, which is only a handful of colleges in the nation actually received the full grant. A lot of people received a partial grant, but we received the full grant. And
maybe describe what that is.
Okay, it is a grant where we are going to renovate one of our buildings on campus at Warner, and we are going to turn it into a Native American Cultural Center. We are also creating online classes and different things that are going to help Native Americans with their different learning styles. We have partnered with other nations to try and get as many new scholarships and many new opportunities as possible available to our students, because we're 40% Native American, and and it fluctuates by like 1% one way or the other, 39 sometimes, 41 sometimes, but I just say 40% Native American. And we started gathering resources, and so we are going to have wonderful resource rooms, wonderful things that over the next few years that will be available to Connors students. One of the things we're doing in the upcoming semesters, we're going to start having online classes that are available. We're going to have different Native American language classes as well. So we're going to teach, Cherokee 1 and 2. We're also going to have, I don't know what the appropriate term for it is, but I'll just call it a sensitivity training, and talk to some of our teachers about some of the issues that I talked to you about. Like a student who doesn't meet them in their eyes when they're talking to them, that does not necessarily mean they're not listening. That's a way of showing respect with certain students. And there are a lot of little cultural things that people don't pick up on, but since we are really pushing to reach our Native American population, because we have such a large Native American population already at Connors, we really wanted the teachers and the staff to be aware of some of the cultural challenges that they will be facing when they start teaching these students. And so we're working on coming up with a program where we get to talk to our faculty about some of these things and make them aware. There's just a lot of amazing things coming up with this grant, but what I personally am going to be doing with the Title III is I will be a Native American student advisor on our Muskogee campus, and I will continue to be the advisor for the Native American Student Association. We'll continue with our monthly activities, except now we'll actually have more funding for it. Because we grew to over 40 students, and even on such a small college campus, that was kind of interesting on one campus, and now I'm sure it'll grow quite a bit more now that we've expanded to our other campus. But we will continue to have cultural activities. We're going to do things like visit the Heritage Center, here, and we'll go to the 5 Civilized Tribe Museum, things like this. But we are going to try and create an environment where people can thrive and people can come in. A lot of our Native American students are first-generation college students, and they might have a lot of fears, a lot of worries coming in, and maybe have a little problem getting out of their shell and becoming more involved in campus. And so we want to present activities to people in such a way as to allow them to be comfortable, to be happy, to make friends, to make connections for life. And so we are having a lot of fun with that, and so I will be working on programming and continuing to work with NASA, and I will also be helping advise these students to get them in all of these new classes and help them find their place here at Connors, and hopefully give them some direction on where they might be going in their future career and some of the things that are available to them.
Yeah. That's a lot of things that you're able to kind of start moving toward. It's a lot of planning, and I think I want to come back to some more details on that for a second. But let me back up a second and try and understand a little bit better from that initial role as the Native American Student Association advisor. were you doing that as an employee of the library, or was that something you were doing on your own?
That was something that I was doing on my own. They always try to have, an adult employee that is an advisor for for any organization, but it was, not something that I was getting paid for or anything else. In fact, I wound up putting a lot of my own money into it, getting things started. Mm-hmm. But because our students, we had wonderful students that always made sure they showed up at the student meetings where all the organizations gathered together, student council meetings. Mm-hmm. Anyway, when our students made sure there was always a representative there from our student organization. Because of that, the student council actually granted us some funds, and so I was able to use that with fundraisers and some of my own money to be able to continue to do these different activities. One of the things that we did, ladies may like the beading workshop, and ladies may be really into the basket weaving, but our male students may not be completely thrilled. And so when I bought the looms and we got everything in, I had someone come in who was one of the other students, who's one of our wonderful adopted students that's amazing at beading, and she makes hat bands for like cowboy hats and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so she came in and she showed the guys how to make hat bands, and so they started working on making their own hat bands. And we talked about making belt buckles our next go around, but a lot of different interesting things that would take care not just of the female interest but the males. And so we would come up with different topics. What do we want our activity to be next month, and we'd have some interesting ideas. One of the things that we talked about with the guys, that there's a wonderful man in Muskogee who makes hunting vests out of buckskin. And he makes hunting vests that he actually puts the, I don't know what else you would call them, they're not fluorescent, whatever, the bright colored strips on the back of the hunting vest so that you can wear them and to any activities, and it'll be legal while you're hunting and everything else. But, that was one of the things that we had talked about doing next semester with the guys, is having somebody come in and show them how to make different styles of Native American hunting vests and make them also legal to wear while they're hunting. And so that was neat.
So how did you go from that role? Who applied for this grant, and what was either your awareness or your participation in that process?
I had no participation whatsoever with the grant writing process. That had already been begun long before I started at Connors, and Connors received the grant after I had been here. They were in the beginning stages of receiving the grant when I came through the doors. And finally, one day, as the grant progressed and they got ready to hire some more staff and get everything going, because Title III was really not on campus until recently, I got a call and I came into an office and I said, all my bosses are here. What did I do? Am I in trouble? And I kind of looked around nervously, and they're like, Callie, we need to talk to you about something. Okay, what did I do? And they told me that they were going to have some positions open up in the Title III grant, and because I was the Native American Student Association advisor, that they would like me to at least look at applying for some of them, because they thought some of those things might be of interest to me. So, I looked and I asked questions about Title III and got to learn a little bit of information about it, and I applied for it and got the job, and now that's what I guess I'm going to be doing.
Congratulations. It sounds like it's a really good fit. So you also mentioned that you were part of the NASA group, and OSU, was that in Stillwater, or while you were in Stillwater and Tulsa, or all three campuses?
I was at all three campuses. Believe it or not, I know I'm not an international student at all, but when I was at OSU at Milwaukee, they had a wonderful international student program, and they would do like a potluck dinner, once a month or whatever, and they would bring like different cultural foods. And one of my roommates said, you're always making weird stuff. And I'm like, making weird stuff? Because, whatever you're raised with when you're at home and you cook, you don't think about something being odd. They're like, you make cultural type stuff. You should bring a dish to the potluck. And I'm like, okay. I was, all right, so I'll try it. And I brought something, and then somehow that became a thing, and I started, I'd bring a dish every time they'd have a potluck. But I got to be part of that group, even though I was not an international student, just because I showed up with food. And so I had a lot of fun with that. And then I met a lot of wonderful people while I was at OSU Stillwater. I was not as involved once I moved to OSU Tulsa as I was at OSU Stillwater, simply because I was working, 30 hours a week, and it was hard to juggle all the events. But I still got to swing a few of the events, and I really enjoyed some of the things that they offered, and just meeting up with people from different backgrounds. Mm-hmm. It's really always interesting to see different perspectives and how people view things.
Mm-hmm. Are there some of the things that you participated in those NASA groups from OSU, things that you carried over when you became the NASA advisor here at college?
Definitely. And a lot of times if I would go and speak, it was not always specifically as a Native American Women in Agriculture ambassador that I would go to someplace. Sometimes it was just I would have a friend who was from a certain tribe, and they just wanted me to come mm-hmm. and talk with them, or bring some resources, or at least help them get into contact with certain things. And so I would go somewhere and meet with them. Right. But a lot of times if I would go somewhere and speak, they would give you like a gift basket, for the speaker or whatever. So I wound up getting a lot of different beadwork and different pottery and different little things while I was in high school that I stored and all this other stuff. But then as I transitioned into the NASA advisor, I was able to start bringing those things and showing them as examples to my students of different tribes. And so I would do like, a little display of different types of beadwork and say, okay, is there a specific thing that you want to learn in this meeting? And so we would talk about it, and they would decide whatever was their next project for the next meeting, and we would come up with fun things. But because I had so many different knickknacks and wonderful tribal gifts, I was able to present them with a lot of things. And then I also had the experience with OSU Stillwater and their NASA events, and was able to see, I have these things to draw from. Mm-hmm. And somehow or another it all meshed together.
I think so. What is there a predominant tribe that the 40% of students here tend to be a part of? What's the sort of
Well, because we
mix?
are Oklahoma, we are the wonderful in location for a lot of people from the Trail of Tears. We have a vast amount of tribes. We have a lot of Cherokees, a lot of Creeks. I think the Cherokee Nation is still working very hard to make sure they get all the slots in our nursing program. We have a wonderful, wonderful nursing program, and a lot of tribal members in our nursing programs, because so many tribal hospitals in the area are in need of nurses and different medical professionals. And so it's really neat to see how people come in to fill a need, to meet a need in our communities. But there are people who are in everything. They may come down to Connors just because they want to be on the rodeo team, or just because they really are wonderful at shooting things and they want to be on the shooting team, or they want to come down and work with our wonderful horticulture teacher and learn all kinds of wonderful things about floral arrangements. There's a lot of things that we offer, but we have a very, very diverse set of tribes at Connors.
Understood. All right, I may have one or two more questions going backwards, but let's is there anything else that you think you want to add about this, sort of what you're doing now or what you have framed for the future?
I am just really interested in finding any resources that I can get to the students. I know that we are going to look for sponsorship from different area tribes for activities that we're going to do, and if we certainly would never ever want to host a powwow on our own, because powwow is a very sacred thing. However, if we find that a tribe is willing to allow my students to come and go to one of their powwows, or have a speaker from different tribes come in and talk to them about how to make a certain cultural thing when we have our different workshops each month, that would be amazing. And so I'm really trying to look into resources for our students to see what they can find and just give them as much of a home away from home as possible. And I feel like my mind was broadened so much, especially when I did study abroad at OSU. It was broadened so much.
Where did you go for study abroad? Tell me about that.
For study abroad, I actually got to go to France. I stayed in Dijon, France, and I got to go to the University of Burgundy in Dijon for a summer. And each weekend I'd go to a different country. And so, and it wasn't necessarily part of the program. You just got to do, your weekends were free when you weren't going to college. And so we would get together with whoever were our friends, and we would go somewhere else. So each weekend I'd go to a different country. I got to see so many wonderful things that I've always wanted to see, and do things that I wanted to do. But my favorite thing, I was actually in Normandy on the anniversary of D-Day, and they were honoring several soldiers from that, and there were many soldiers and family members of soldiers that were there, and that was exceedingly at the D-Day Memorial Museum there. It was an exceedingly emotional event, but it was amazing. And just to see so many people from so many countries come together, not just in grief, but in celebration, was awesome. And I learned something in my travels. So many times I didn't speak any of the languages to some of the countries that I would go to, and so I would have to pick things up as I went along. But I learned that people are very much the same. It doesn't matter where they're from or how they're raised, as far as just wanting to be curious, to learn things, to grow and develop. And we all care about our families. We all care about our culture, our religions, our different things that make us individuals. And when you can kind of connect with people even without being able to speak their language, sometimes is just an amazing human feature.
I agree.
But because I studied that during that period, it was international business that I was studying. It really tied into some of the stuff that I would do later on.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay, so really quickly, or briefly, I guess. After hearing sort of the rest of your story, I just want to go back a little bit to your time as the Women in Ag representative, and maybe flesh out a little bit more of the sort of just details of how that worked, because that is a long time to be that representative. I mean, were you the first one?
I was the first one. The first time they ever had a competition was when I was 14, and I won, and I went to Hollywood, Florida. The next year, they had the same essay competition. It was different topic, different everything, and so I wrote in, and I won again, and that time I got to go to Las Vegas, Nevada. And they were talking to, and there was another girl who did return who had written an essay for a different thing. But, they were having big conferences at this time. And so we would go to the conference, and then we would, speak a little bit. We would talk to everybody and, receive our awards and get to visit. But I got to speak to Janie Hipp and some of the other representatives from different organizations and different tribes when, the first time around. And then when it came to the second time around, I was so interested in going to so many of the workshops and things that they were holding for the women there, that someone asked me, well, would you like to come and talk with me further? And it was one of the speakers at one of the workshops. And I said, well, yeah, that would be wonderful. And I actually wound up going and meeting with her later on in Arizona. And so it was kind of a progressive thing. I don't think it was ever intended that the winners, they were going to be national representatives for Native American women in agriculture, but it was never really intended that they would do a whole lot of travel or anything. It was they were going to represent at the particular activities and the conferences that we had and learn as much as possible, as an opportunity for youth. And then I think I just kind of made enough connections that it grew from there.
That makes more sense to me. I was trying to fit in sort of how that continuation happened. So that I understand. So you mentioned that you won several of the writing competitions for that. Did you have to resubmit, and did you win for 7 years consecutive, or what, how was that?
I only won for 2 years consecutive. The third year, I don't know if it was, I never really figured out if it was funding or if it was what it was, but they didn't hold it the third year. They did later on, but because I was already so involved, they said, well, how would you like to continue to be involved with our organization? How would you like to continue to, come to these meetings and meet with these people? And I talked to them about that, and I said I would very much like that. And the people that I had met there, gave me opportunities. Would you like to come and next time we do a workshop, when we're closer to your state? Well, yeah, I'll go to Texas and go to this workshop. That would be awesome. And so I'd get to go to different places and meet with people, and it was something that just developed as I went along.
Did your mom go with you, or did you go by yourself?
My mom usually went with me because, it started when I was 14, so even at 16, there was no way my mom was going to let me drive through Austin, Texas. She's like, no. That doesn't sound safe. 16-year-old alone in Austin, Texas, and she's like, honey, I love you, but your sense of direction is not always due north. I don't want you getting lost in a huge city and calling me, Mom, I don't know where I am. Because Mom's not tech savvy, and Google and GPS were not really part of our household at that point.
Understandable. Okay, that makes more sense. I kept thinking on that and going, there's more to the logistics of this. And so then you resubmitted a few times after that? No, you just applied those 2 times, and then you continued the relationship.
And then I just finally just asked somebody. I said, I'm here, and I know that you guys keep saying that I'm the national representative or whatever. I said, how long does this last? How do you want me to do this? And they said, well, how about we just continue this till you're 21? And I said, okay. And that was kind of all she wrote on that. There was a lot of times that I didn't do a whole lot specifically with just the Native American women in ag. It was just meeting people at different events and people saying, hey, would you come and speak? Or would you come and help me with this project I'm working on? And if I had the money and I could do it, I would go. Which was another thing that FFA helped with so much, is because I actually was able to make money in the different little projects and stuff, that I had just enough money when I wasn't playing softball and other sports to be able to go to some of these other things. And of course, when you actually get out of school to do events, as a teenager, you're all for going to these events.
Yeah. Especially if they're bubble blowing contests. End up in a bubble blowing contest.
Oh, yes.
I think that about does it for the questions. Sort of the timeline I was looking for. Gosh, you've given me a lot of time already. We've been talking about an hour and a half. Can you believe that? I know. Is there anything else that that you want to talk about? I mean, or one of the standards I think with this project, people always want to know is sort of, are there ways that you show your OSU pride? Use your car orange or your favorite T-shirt, those sorts of things. Well,
I have a Cherokee license tag, but around the Cherokee license tag on my license plate was, of course, the OSU sticker, and I've got the little OSU dangly things for my rear view mirror and all that good stuff. And my husband, who did not go to OSU, his truck is blinged out with OSU, and I have an orange room in my house, and yeah, I have quite a bit of OSU memorabilia. And if you go to the football games or some of the other events, eventually you'll get shot a T-shirt from a T-shirt gun and some of these other things. So things just piled up, and so I finally come up with, I said, all right, we have an office in our house. I'm making it an OSU office. And so that's what it turned into.
I like it. I'm always amazed at how people, you know, sort of show their brightest orange pride.
And I have many, many nieces and nephews, and many, I don't know how it happens, but somehow my family seems to adopt people. And I'm not talking about in a legal sense, it's just we have wonderful friends that become close friends, and they're almost like another sibling. And so we'll have, our family grows. And so even, you know, I have friends whose children call me Aunt Callie, even though, you know, I'm not their actual aunt, but because we're around them so much that it's just a natural extension for them. And I'm sure my kids will do the same thing with them. But all of my nieces and nephews, and my nieces and nephews that are not technically my nieces and nephews, let's just say I've given them all a very strong nudge to become Poke, you know. And anytime there's a camp or there's something offered via OSU, I'm always like, hey, you know what's great? You know what you could do this summer so you're not bored?
Sounds like it worked for you.
It worked.
Keep at it. All right, so now that I know where your orange is not hidden, where it's loud and proud, is there anything else that you want to touch on your general life or career, or anything you just want to add?
I think that I have had really good role models, and I found them in very unexpected places throughout my career and throughout my personal life. And I think anytime you have an opportunity to do something, even if you're not an extrovert, even if you're very introverted, which you may not believe it, but at one point I was, if you have knowledge or skills or abilities that you have possessed, you know, a lot of things that we learn, believe it or not, are passed on through oral tradition. And that's not just a Native American thing, that is a worldwide tradition. And if you do have certain knowledge or skills or abilities, and you come across a young person or someone who seems to be really interested in something that you are really good at and you have the opportunity, I would encourage anybody and everybody to try and pass those skills on while that person is interested and wants to know, because there are a lot of dying arts out there, and you may not realize it. You may be the best scrapbooker in the world, and no one can scrapbook like you can. But you know, your granddaughter somewhere down the line may think, I don't have any pictures of my family and I don't know what I'll do, you know, and you may be able to teach her a thing or two. So, you know, if it's blowing bubbles, scrapbooking, or maybe you have a really other awesome talent, you know, just remember that that is something that can be passed on, and a lot of things, traditions die without someone passing them on.
I think that's good advice.